You got to love Watches and Wonders. The gift that keeps giving, at least to us YouTubers who are always looking for new content to make. Today, what I want to talk about are the 5, at least in my opinion, the 5 most important watches released at Watches and Wonders in 2024. Hi, I'm Pete McConville. Welcome to my channel where I like to overthink, overanalyze, and just geek out on watches. And today what I'm geeking out on are the 5 most important watches, in my opinion, that were released at Watches and Wonders 2024. Before I go on, let's just say, by important, I don't mean in some sort of pretentious haute horology, Eric Wind kind of, this is important because some movie star wore it type of importance. I mean important to the industry or the brand. If the brand doesn't get this right, people will lose their jobs kind of important. So that's how I've done this assessment. So we'll start with what I think are the most important watches. This is actually a pair that came from a single brand, and this is the Bremont Terra Nova and Supermarine update. Bremont has new owners, new management, new direction, new logo, and 2 new collections. And if those collections don't work, everything else, that new logo, that new direction, that new management, they could all be in trouble. They need this to work. I'm not going to talk about today whether they will or won't. Omens don't look great at the moment, but early days. Maybe this will work out okay. But as I said, if they don't get this right, it's possible that the brand itself is in trouble. Nowhere near as important, but not a million miles away, I would put number 2 on my list, which is the new Zenith Defy Divers. Okay, Zenith is not as big as we all think it is. It's a mid-pack watch company selling a relatively small number of watches each and every year. And whilst it is backed by one of the biggest companies in the world in LVMH, it is still a relatively small brand in its own right. So when that brand decides to commit the resources required to create an entirely new genre of watch for them, the dive watch, and in probably the single most congested and contested genre of watches, the dive watch, you've got to get that right. And so the new Zenith Defy Diver is absolutely crucial to Zenith's long-term performance that this go well, that this be well received, and that this sell. Again, it is in fact one of my favorite watches, and I think they did an outstanding job, but that's another video. Okay, so moving from a brand that's doing something brand new to them in making a diver, let's go to a brand now which has been making divers for years, and that is Oris. I think the Oris Aquis relaunch is of crucial importance to Oris. Oris has a number of different lines. It's got the Diver 65 and the Aquis, and a number of others like the Pro Pilot X, the Pointer Date. But those others, the Pointer Date, the Pro Pilot X, they kind of circle around the 2 big pillars, the Aquis and the Diver 65. And so when you mess with the Aquis, when you withdraw the old model and come out with an entirely new rethink of that category, that part of your catalog, you've got to get it right. You've got to be very careful. And Oris was. Oris has been very careful, incredibly measured, very delicate in the upgrade to the Aquis. And I think the care within which Oris took this change and the delicacy, the nuance, all very fancy words of saying how little they did, I think really does reflect the importance of this brand, this part of their catalog to the brand. Okay, so I've done a whole video on this next watch, so I'm not going to beat it to death now, and that is the Hermes cut. Why is the Hermes cut important? Because Hermes is aiming this watch at the single, what in my opinion, the softest part of the Rolex demographic. That is, women who are buying 28, 31, 34 millimeter OPs and date justs, often two-tone, often with gem sets. That is a huge proportion of the Rolex catalog. We don't think of it that way, but it is. And I think it's also the softest part of the catalog. What I mean by that is the people shopping in that part of the catalog aren't diehard Rolex folks. I think if another brand with as much oomph, with as much brand power, with as much identity that could perhaps offer parallel, you know, products that those buyers want to get into, I think that's the market which is most easily reached. And so when Hermes, the maker of one of the most prestigious brands in the world, probably rivals Rolex overall, certainly amongst women, probably a more prestigious brand, releases a watch aimed directly at that market, that is important. That can do things to reshape the how market share is distributed. And I think it'll have a lot to do with the timing of when AP overtakes Rolex as being at the head of the Swiss watch industry. But that last comment is certainly for another video, another day. But like I said, I think the Hermes cut is a super important watch in what it represents for the future of that segment of the market. Okay, so the fifth and final watch that I'm really going to talk about in depth here is the Tudor Black Bay. Everyone's calling it the monochromatic, Tudor Black Day Black, you could just call it. Or as I personally like to think of it, the Tudor Black Bay Tamaza Slam. Because, look, every time I look at this watch, I feel like I'm going to nod off. It is insanely boring. But that boringness is kind of why it's also insanely interesting. It's boring in the way that a Toyota Camry is boring. It's boring in the way that a Ford F-150 is boring. But it's important in a way that the Camry and the F-150 are important because they're huge sellers. They're the core of just the meat and potatoes, to use that expression, of a brand. And the Tudor Black Bay is particularly important, this monochromatic one, because it opens up a whole bunch of questions about where is Tudor going next. Until this watch came out, I could have described to you a very clear difference between the Black Bay and the Pelagos. They had very different intent. They were directed at quite different people. They were trying to achieve quite different things. So the Black Bay was predominantly a heritage-based watch line, looking backwards, very much tying itself to its Rolex roots. The Pelagos, on the other hand, was more contemporary, more forward-looking, freer from the Rolex heritage of Tudor. With the Black Bay monochromatic, I'm unsure where that distinction lies anymore. I'm unsure what the difference between a Black Bay and a Pelagos is. I look at this monochrome and put it next to, say, a Pelagos all black, and I ask, why does the same company make both of these watches? Which then leads me to think, does the monochromatic illustrate something about the future, broader about the future of Tudor? Does this signal that, just as we've all been joking that Tudor is kind of the Black Bay company, does this watch signal that is going to be actually what happens in the future? I don't know, but I think just the possibility that it could change kind of our understanding of a brand as important as Tudor makes this an important watch. Okay, I have two honorable mentions here. They're not important in the same way as the other watches have been, but I think they do have an outsized level of importance to the brand. The first is the JLC Duometer. Over the last couple of years, there's a sense that JLC has kind of lost their way. There's a sense that JLC's lost their center, their core, their idea of who they are. interesting, during that time, the duometer line has been slowly shriveling away. Maybe with the introduction of this watch, with its insane complexity and its sort of just the amount of horological expertise that this requires, is a mark, a sign that JLC is kind of rediscovering who it was and who it could be, and that this might represent something of a turnaround in the brand. My second honorable mention isn't going to really be important in financial terms. They're not going to sell a lot of these watches, is the IWC Eternal, or the Perpetually Eternal. I can't remember what the name is. Basically, that perpetual calendar they did that's going to have moon phases accurate for like 4 million years, and I think the perpetual calendar is accurate out to the year 4000 or something. The reason why this is important, it's not from a financial point of view, it's not for any kind of market sort of market share perspective, but this is important because IWC, being the kind of brand that produces these kind of watches, IWC becoming known as the kind of brand that can release these kind of watches, helps IWC sell $18,000 Ingenieurs. It helps IWC sell very basic pilot's watches for $10,000. These sorts of watches underpin your horological expertise, your horological reputation. And I think getting this right, making this interesting, making this something that people want to talk about, that sticks in your mind, is very important to IWC for that strategy of raising themselves up the hierarchy and being able to charge more for all their other watches. So anyway, that's it. They're my 5 most important watches for the watch industry in 2024 from Watches and Wonders 2024, with 2 honorable mentions. What about you? Were there other watches that you think are as or more important? Do you think these watches aren't that important really to the industry, and there's others you would like to see? Stick it in the comments below. As I said in the intro, I've been Pete McConville. This is what I do: overthink, overanalyze, blah, blah, blah. If that sounds like your jam and you want to see more of it, like, subscribe, hit the bell icon, all that YouTube stuff. We'll see you later. Bye.